NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has been tasked by member states to extend his term as the leader of the alliance. It's the third time the former Norwegian Prime Minister has had his term extended, with some countries expressing caution about finding a replacement now, given the war in Ukraine. For more, we're now joined by Trent Murray in Berlin. Trent, thank you so much for your time. So how much longer will Mr. Stoltenberg be sticking around, Trent?
Well, at least until October of 2024, but it's worth remembering that he was due to retire later this year. In fact, he publicly signalled he would, so we could see his term extended yet again next year. I mean, look, it just speaks to the fact that those 31 countries that make up the NATO alliance really do not want to have a change at the top right now. I think they want to keep a steady pair of hands at the top of the alliance, just given how much uncertainty there is right now with the security situation in Europe. I don't think there'll be much time for Jens Stoltenberg to celebrate getting another term. He's got a lot to do over the next couple of days, of course, namely preparing for that major summit taking place next week in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania. World leaders from 31 different countries that make up NATO coming to the small Baltic country, including President Joe Biden. But ahead of that meeting, we should also mention a crucial get-together he is hosting tomorrow between Turkey and Sweden. You might recall Sweden desperate to get into the alliance. Turkey has got some concerns about letting Sweden in, given some of the people that live in Sweden that are part of a group known the PKK. It's all quite complicated, but what Jens Stoltenberg is trying to do is potentially to get a deal to see if he can get Sweden in ahead of time, in time for that meeting next week.
Now, earlier we mentioned Ukraine, concerns growing about just the safety at the nuclear power plant. Just talk to us about some of those concerns.
Look, this is a really concerning development, and it's not just for Ukraine, but really for all of Europe. Now, we know the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has long been in the crossfire of both sides. It is Europe's largest nuclear power plant down in the south of Ukraine. It is controlled by Russians right now. It's inside Russian-held territory, but the Ukrainians are obviously trying to take back that territory. And so we have seen shelling and exchanges of fire between both sides right in a place really it shouldn't be happening, given the nuclear power plant is there. Now, the new information that we have is that President Zelensky has released a statement in the past 24 hours saying Ukrainian intelligence has picked up that objects resembling explosives have been placed on the roof of the nuclear power plant. Now, Russia is saying it's received intelligence that Ukraine could be planning some sort of attack. So look, both sides pointing the finger at one another. What we, of course, don't want to see is any sort of accident at that nuclear power plant, because anyone with a long memory of, Chernobyl in Ukraine will recall that if something like that was to happen, then the radiation could spread to other parts of Europe. So a really concerning development, and we understand diplomatic calls taking place right now between many different countries to really try and defuse the situation here to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Trent, last question before I let you go. Of course, you mentioned that major summit that is coming up. Time and time again, we've been hearing, that Ukraine possibly wanting to step up its efforts to join NATO. Anything we know about, this being on the agenda possibly?
Look, it will certainly be discussed, but if I was a betting man, I would not be betting on any sort of quick accession here for Ukraine into NATO at this meeting. Expectations already being met around all of this. I mean, the simple reality is Ukraine is in the middle of a war, and so the military alliance won't want to let them in right now, given that if they were to become a member, that it would oblige all the other members to then send in the cavalry and protect them. That is how the NATO alliance works. An attack on one is an attack on all. But what we could see is some sort of framework for how Ukraine could join at a later stage, or maybe some sort of individual security guarantees. Not full NATO membership, but maybe the likes of the UK or France or Germany throwing its hat into the ring and saying, look, we'll provide some individual support. It's all very much up in the air right now. I think for NATO's leadership, Ukraine is certainly important, and there's a conversation about what will happen to them in the longer term. but the more immediate priority is trying to get Sweden in, because they are very, very keen to get in there, and they've just got that one country holding them up, and that, of course, is Turkey.